The ancestor's obsession into the occult extended beyond just the excavation. He was determined to become a master in the dark arts, regardless of the cost to his own sanity. Nowhere is his descent into madness more apparent than in the ruins. The hallways are filled with knowledge. Books and scrolls lay strewn about next to holy artifacts and half-finished alchemy experiments. Should we pace out these black shifting corridors, we will find a treasure trove of relics and wealth. But we must walk cautiously. We are not alone in these halls, for the dead and the undying have claimed this castle as their own. Before the ruins fell into disrepair, it was once the castle and seat of power for the ancestor's family. Decades before the ancestor's birth, his family was that of nobility, perhaps even royalty. They ruled from their castle, but as time went by, wars were waged, and eventually they swore fealty to another monarchy. Taking lesser titles, they would eventually abandon the castle and construct the manor on the cliff side of the estate. The castle would slowly fall into disrepair, and the only residents being those in the crypts, soldiers and nobles who had died in the defense of the castle. Decades later, the ancestor would be born and inherit the land's wealth and title befitting his noble line. When his interests in the eldritch arts began to form, he would use the ruins for his experiments. It was here that his pursuit into necromancy would begin. Using his immense wealth, he would have various experts brought in from overseas to share their knowledge and alchemical processes with. But once he had learned all he could from his guests, he butchered them in their sleep, either to save what wealth he could, or so they wouldn't divulge any of his own secrets. While the excavation continued to drain his coffers, he would use his skills in necromancy to resurrect his former colleagues, with their intelligence intact. Such a feat was incredible, even for an expert. He gave them their orders. Raise him an army, one that doesn't fear, nor tire, and is loyal to him alone. I theorize that he did this near the end of his life, after hiring the brigands, and realizing that once his wealth was completely gone, they would also turn on him as well. The necromancers did as they were ordered, and the dead revived the dead for eternity. Even after the ancestors' death, the necromancers continued to raise the army. The ruins became overrun with the reanimated skeletons, all tasked with defending their ancestral home from any would-be invaders. Foot soldiers make up the bulk of the army. Wielding wooden clubs or rusted swords, they stand as the front lines, accompanied by the defenders, who stand better equipped with their shields and axes. Spearmen litter the ranks as well. Using their spears, they are able to thrust forward, impaling all of our party members. Behind them are the arbalists, firing bolts from their crossbows that can be devastating to a marked target. While these soldiers are numerous, their strength lies in their numbers, and they work best when paired with one of the more specialized units. The captains. In life, they stood as veterans of war, leading the charge. In Undeath, they play largely the same role. They are tough, heavy-hitting frontline attackers, clad in armor and wielding a mace. The very ground quakes as they step, leaving our party stunned and open to the enemy's attack. Not all those the necromancers brought back were warriors. Some were courtiers, nobles, or even royals. These courtiers prefer to stay in the back rows, wielding their goblets, whose contents give our party stress. Why or how this is even possible is up for interpretation. Mine is that there's something within the wine that is giving our party stress. perhaps a curse given by the necromancers that tempts those to drink from it. Since when we acquire the tempting goblet, we see that it gives a massive health boost at the cost of stress and virtue. The promise of life, a taste of their powers. It's not their only means of attacking, though. They do carry daggers to stab any of their targets who get too close. The final member of this army is the most troublesome, for they are able to tap into the powers of the necromancers. The banner bearers are more supporters than fighters. They are a symbol for the unholy army to rally around, boosting the strength of the group. Going further, they can use their trumpet to increase the accuracy and damage of an individual unit, but their most irritating trait is their ability to revive the undead we've already defeated. Unless the corpse of the slain is completely destroyed, the banner bearer will continue to revive it, a power we once thought reserved only for the leaders of this undead legion. The necromancers stand as the leaders of this faction. Still being partially of flesh, we can see that they look a lot more eldritch in appearance, which fits the enemy type of unholy eldritch. Interesting note that could tell us perhaps what the necromancers were like in life. While not the most devastating in battle, their skills lie elsewhere. They are experts in their craft of resurrecting the dead. Every action summons a member of their army to their side. And these attacks are interesting in that each hero has a unique dialogue response, which gives us insight into their backstory, or even something about the necromancer. In The Flesh is Willing, the necromancer gets close to the party, attacking with his eldritch tentacle and giving them an unobstructed view of his visage. With the Clawing Dead, he summons forth souls enslaved by his will to drag our heroes down to the pit. Some will even see their past sins return to weigh them down. And with 6 feet under, he gifts our heroes with a vision of their impending death or doom. After all, there are fates worse than death. There's more than just the undead in the ruins, for if you listen carefully, past the sounds of bones and armor shuffling, you might hear what sounds like someone shouting. The ruins also play host to a deranged immortal man, a man who has lived to witness all he warned against come to pass. If our ancestor ever had a rival, it was this man. No one knows his true name, but they call him the Prophet. While the excavation was progressing deeper under the manor, a ragged man appeared one day in the hamlet. He began ranting about the ancestor, exposing his crimes to the public with almost uncanny detail, and warned that if the ancestor was not stopped, he would bring about the end of the world. Unfortunately for the Prophet, the ancestor bribed the constabulary to turn a blind eye to his activities. The ancestor had the Prophet quickly disposed of, but something was wrong. The Prophet would not die. He kept coming back, again and again, to rant and warn the townsfolk about the ancestor. He would survive torture, drowning, and even stabbings delivered by the ancestor himself. His reputation as an immortal allowed him to gain a sizable following as he continued to preach on about the ancestor's sins. Finally, in an attempt to best his rival, the ancestor lured the Prophet to the dig site. Once there, he showed him the thing and detailed the full extent of his plans. The Prophet tore his own eyes out from the sight of the creature and ran away screaming that the end was upon us all. Driven mad by the sight of the thing, the Prophet was mentally broken, but his body would not allow him to die. He would wander into the castle's chapel, and there he resides, hiding behind the pews and the crumbling rubble. What became of his followers is unknown. Maybe they're the screaming madmen we encounter, or maybe the ancestor had them all executed, or maybe the prophet murdered his own flock out of madness. In battle, the prophet continues to scream gibberish. He still kept his eyes, and with them, he is able to see the future, since he's able to foresee where the rubble will land, and will gift our heroes with a vision of it. Perhaps to warn us, or maybe just to further damage our sanity. His eyes are also able to stun our heroes, and even his own saliva has become toxic. However, where did he come from? And why or how did he achieve immortality? These questions are unlikely to have a clear answer, so we must give our own theories onto his origins. It's my belief that the prophet has ties to the civilization that existed on the land prior to the ancestor's family, the same civilization that built the Warrens. The ancestor claims the excavation was well underway when the prophet arrived, which I took to mean they had broken into the Warrens. That may have been a warning to the prophet that someone was digging for the darkest dungeon. He could be the last member of that civilization, tasked with keeping people away from the door, using the gifts of immortality and prophecy. Although now, those gifts seem like a curse, for the knowledge of such prophecies had taken his mind, and now, his immortality perpetuates his suffering. The ruins are truly a forsaken place, but it is our home, the seat of our power, now the domain of the undead and the undying, an affront to the natural order of life and death. If we have any hope of reclaiming the estate and redeeming our family name, we must drive these unholy monsters back into their graves.
Room by room, hall by hall, we reclaim what is ours.